Police department, police department.
Hello, help,
yes.
please.
This is 37-year-old Jimmy Allan. Jimmy just discovered his wife's body in the basement of their Michigan home. 18 minutes earlier, he placed this 911 call.
Okay, what's going on there?
She's in the basement.
Somebody called.
Pulled her up. I tried to give her CPR. I pulled her up.
The dispatcher instructed Jimmy to continue giving Amy CPR while several units rushed to the scene. Officer Ben J. Horn was the first to arrive. Despite the desperation in Jimmy's voice during the 911 call, it was eerily silent as Officer Horn approached the residence. However, as soon as the officer made himself known, Jimmy began crying out for help.
Police department, police department.
Hello, help,
yes.
please.
Jimmy was found in the basement, sobbing over his unresponsive wife's body. As he grieved, he continued performing CPR.
How long's she been down? Do you have any idea? Do you have any idea?
Can't be more than about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Oddly enough, Amy didn't have any significant injuries, except for a very faint mark near her jugular. By 8:57 p.m., more officers arrived along with several EMTs. They piled into the basement to take over Jimmy's life-saving efforts. Now that Jimmy had a moment to process what was going on, he dramatically ripped his shirt off and broke down on the basement floor. He was able to quickly compose himself and continued to observe the EMTs aiding Amy. Jimmy alternated between complete composure and emotional outbursts several times.
You want to come upstairs with me real quick? Okay.
As you can see, Jimmy seemed calm as he walked up the basement stairs, but as he entered the kitchen, he unleashed his wrath onto an unsuspecting bowl of potato chips. The officers weren't sure what to make of this erratic behavior, especially since they had no clue what led up to the discovery of Amy's body.
Did she make any statements at all?
No,
Jimmy gave the officers a quick summary of his and Amy's night. At around 6:30 p.m., the couple dropped their daughter and her friend off at a nearby high school football game and then headed downtown for some drinks. While at a bar, they got into an argument and Amy ended up walking home alone while Jimmy drove home in their car. When Amy got back home, the arguing continued, so he left her alone to cool off. He went upstairs and threw on the Jim Carrey film Ace Ventura. When it was time to pick up their daughter, he went to check on Amy again.
I was irritated and I didn't hear anything, so I went back down and checked on her. And
Does Amy have a history of anything like this? Nothing in her background at all?
Ever.
Okay.
The officers found it strange that Amy would escalate things to this degree out of nowhere. But nobody seemed as shocked as Jimmy.
I'm hoping I wake up, dude.
Unfortunately for Jimmy, this was a nightmare that he wouldn't be waking up from. But suddenly, an EMT emerged from the basement with a glimmer of hope.
Huh? What?
Says she's fighting.
No.
The EMTs were able to re-establish a faint pulse, so Amy was still clinging to life. But when Jimmy realized that his wife was still breathing, he seemed frustrated by this promising news. His reaction immediately set off red flags for the officers. Jimmy then left the room momentarily to grab a new shirt, and when he came back, he called his daughter Ashley to inform her of the emergency.
We had an emergency. Don't go anywhere. There's an emergency. Don't go anywhere. I'll talk to you in a little bit.
Jimmy didn't want Ashley to panic over the phone, so he kept his composure and didn't share any details of what had happened. But right after that phone call, he called his parents and spilled his heart out.
Oh, I don't know what to do, Mom. I don't know what to do. Oh, this is terrible. I gotta talk to the cops.
Although Jimmy was crying his heart out, the officers spotted no moisture on his face at all. They decided to have him wait outside, away from the crime scene. Shortly after, Amy was placed on a stretcher and taken to the back of an ambulance. They rushed her to the ProMedica Herrick Hospital, just 2 minutes away. The EMTs were finished in the basement, so the officers headed back inside to do further investigation. Now that the dust had settled, they immediately noticed something strange. The basement ceilings were very low, so low that they began to question the logistics of Jimmy's story. Amy was 5 foot 6 inches, and the basement ceiling wasn't much higher, roughly 7 feet. But rather than jumping to conclusions, the investigators decided to wrap things up for the night. The next morning, Officer Horn and his partner returned to the Allan household to ask Jimmy some more questions. They hoped to get a better understanding of what led up to the incident. According to Jimmy, the family started their day in high spirits by making breakfast together and getting Ashley ready for school.
Just listening to music and making me lunch and breakfast, smile on her face.
At around 7:30 a.m., Jimmy left for work and Ashley left for school, while Amy stayed home. Jimmy decided to leave work early, so around 12:30 p.m., he came home and took a nap. Then, at 2:45 p.m., the school day was over and it was time to pick up Ashley.
Ashley had a friend over, Kayla, after school. Amy picked her up and I was just kind of in bed. And they came here, she made everybody dinner, 6:30. We rolled out to take them to the game.
After a nice family dinner, everybody hopped in the car and drove to the Tecumseh High School for the football game. As mentioned before, Jimmy and Amy dropped off the girls and decided to head downtown to go bar hopping. They first went to Ember's Bar and Grill, then to JR's Hometown Grill and Pub shortly after. Investigators would later confirm this part of Jimmy's story by obtaining the security footage from JR's. Apparently, nothing seemed out of the ordinary until Jimmy brought up the idea of selling their house and moving down south. Since the family had just moved to Michigan from Florida 1 year earlier, Amy was not fond of this idea. She began texting someone on her phone and became dismissive of Jimmy's comments.
She said a couple of times that, oh, that's not going to work. And she's normally positive and was sort of down and negative. And we started to disagree about it. And she's like, you know, I hope that works out for you. And I'm like, what do you mean me? I'm talking about our life. Like, and this isn't hardcore planning. This is like you talking about, you know, our future. And she just, well, I hope that works out for you.
Jimmy said that this comment sparked an argument between the two. By the time they left the bar, things were very tense. Amy decided that she would rather walk home than sit with Jimmy any longer. This was also confirmed by this surveillance footage, which captured Amy walking down the street, heading in the direction of their house. Amy arrived home at 7:58 p.m. She grabbed an extension cord and then went down to the basement. At 8:05 p.m., Jimmy decided to go check on her.
She's petting Louie, one of our cats, and what the hell are you doing in the basement?
Apparently, Amy was angry at him for slamming the door in her face as they left the bar. But according to Jimmy, it was just an accident. He did forget to hold the door for her, but he didn't slam it intentionally. Amy didn't believe that it was an accident, so she started throwing insults at him, and the two proceeded to argue for about 10 minutes. Nothing good was coming from this argument, so Jimmy went back upstairs, leaving Amy in the basement with the extension cord. About 25 minutes later, at 8:40 p.m., Jimmy realized that it was time to pick up Ashley from the football game. Before he left, he went back to the basement to squash the beef with Amy.
And immediately do that and started, you know, check for a pulse. When I glanced down there, I saw there looked like a upturned kitty litter pail.
Huh.
Because I'm like, like I said, it was just so,
Sure.
The officer asked if there were any signs that something like this might happen, but Jimmy said that he could never have seen this coming.
you know, spent all night kind of thinking and playing back what triggered what was.
Has she ever tried anything like this before?
She's never had anything ever. Like, we live a healthy lifestyle. We work out. We go rock climbing 3 times a week in Ann Arbor. We like cook meals at home. We grow our own vegetables out here. Money trouble. No, I mean, this is like the pinnacle of, like, you know, best job I've ever had. I make great money. She's a stay-at-home mom. She takes care of the 5 cats, the pool, and is there for my daughter doing sports and activities.
Sure.
The officer then asked if he and his partner could do a more thorough search of the home, and Jimmy agreed. With the help of their new recruit, Louie, Jimmy's cat, the officer scoured every room in the household, hoping to find any clues that could explain last night's incident. They weren't able to find any bombshell evidence, but they did collect several items that belonged to Amy, including her computer and cell phone. Following their search, Officer Horn headed back outside to speak with Ashley. She was visibly shaken up by the incident, but the detectives needed to know if Amy and Jimmy had a history of violent altercations.
Were your mom and dad fighting at all yesterday that you recall?
No, but everything was normal when I left.
When you left? Okay. Is there a history of the fighting or arguing or anything like that? Nothing ever? Okay.
The officer also asked about Amy's state of mind, but Ashley said that even though her mom was a deeply introverted person, she had always been emotionally stable. This interview wasn't as fruitful as the officers had hoped, but shortly after, they were approached by several of Amy's family members. They said that Jimmy waited 14 hours to tell them about the incident. As soon as they heard the news, they rushed over to the police department because they had an abundance of useful information for the police. The investigators learned that back in 1997, when Amy was just 13, she had a son named Caleb. Her parents looked after Caleb while she attended high school in Ocala, Florida. By the end of high school, she began dating Jimmy, who had no problem becoming a father figure to Caleb. When Amy was 19, they had Ashley, and from that point on, Amy stayed home to take care of the kids while Jimmy worked. However, according to Amy's family, this wasn't her choice. They believed that Jimmy was a controlling husband who didn't want Amy to become financially independent. He would monitor everything the family did, from their social media activity to what they were eating throughout the day. He would also discipline the kids if he believed they were misbehaving, frequently taking things too far. Whenever Amy stood up to Jimmy, her opinion didn't seem to matter. Whatever Jimmy wanted, Jimmy got. So when Caleb turned 17, he left to stay with his grandparents. Jimmy retaliated, telling Amy that she was no longer allowed to speak with her family, including Caleb. One of the last times Caleb saw her was at his high school graduation a year before the incident. But other than that, Amy had minimal involvement in Caleb's life. All of this evidence was extremely damning for Jimmy. It wouldn't be a surprise if an abusive and controlling husband tried to murder his wife. But if the police wanted to bulletproof their case against Jimmy, they needed to answer one big question. What was Jimmy's motive? Unfortunately, before the investigators could answer this question, they received tragic news. On September 17, 2018, after being unresponsive for 3 days, Amy was taken off of life support and pronounced dead. With a possible homicide now on their hands, the authorities pressed on with their investigation. They decided to look for answers in Amy's cell phone. In her texts with Jimmy, his controlling behavior was on full display. He had somehow been tracking Amy's every move. He would frequently text Amy her exact location and ask her why she was there. Despite all of Jimmy's torment, Amy seemed completely fine in her other conversations. This evidence strengthened the case against Jimmy, but the detectives still couldn't pinpoint an exact motive. That was until they looked through a conversation with a man named George. George was a married man from the East Coast that Amy had met online and had been texting for the past 3 years. Based on the explicit content of the messages, it was clear that they were having an affair. Even on the day of the incident, Amy and George were consistently texting and calling each other. While Amy was having dinner with her family at 5:07 p.m., George texted her saying, "I wish we could be together right now." At 5:29 p.m., Amy responded with, "I'm excited to see you again." And remember when Amy began texting somebody during the argument at JR's Grill and Pub? It turns out that she was texting George, even with Jimmy sitting directly beside her. From these findings, a new theory emerged. Perhaps Jimmy had caught a glimpse of these text conversations and was overcome with anger, which ultimately led to him attacking Amy in the basement. The investigators were eager to ask Jimmy some more questions, but they ran into a small problem. Jimmy was nowhere to be found. It turns out that just a few days after the incident, Jimmy and Ashley packed their belongings, including their 5 cats, and headed back to their hometown, Ocala, Florida, to stay with family. Thankfully, the authorities were easily able to get in touch with Jimmy to arrange another interview. He told them that he would be back in Michigan in a few weeks to grab some of his stuff. Since the Tecumseh Police Department had limited personnel and resources, the Michigan State Police had taken over the investigation, and Detective Larry Rothman was put on the case. 1 month after Amy's death, he met Jimmy at the station for a formal interview. During his stay in Florida, Jimmy had plenty of time to reflect on his relationship with Amy, and he was forthright with the detective about his shortcomings.
It wasn't so inner focused and self-focused, and maybe I could have seen some things that were going on that maybe could have clued me into what my wife was in so much turmoil that I couldn't even see it. I mean, that's how it feels. Like, I don't even know who I am.
It's hard to believe this statement from Jimmy because moments later, when asked to describe himself, he gives an awfully detailed answer.
Describe yourself. What kind of a person are you?
I would say I'm a type A personality. I like structure, organization, and ambition.